Hello. Welcome to Barcelona. Has anybody heard John here before? Because he spoke here yesterday at another event. Anybody here? So there's a couple of guys here. Great, great, great. So this is the extension pack. This is level 2. So coming from several entrepreneurial projects, you sold them, they were small, then you come up with something new. What happened at that point? And then you sold from where you sort of knew that you're onto something to acquisition by Google.
Okay, sure. I mean, I've had the opportunity to have this incredible experience of starting something and having, on the team we had some ideas, some vision about where we thought it could go, it might go, that, we're almost afraid to even think some of the thoughts or say them out loud, and then to see, with the help of Google, basically all of those things happen. So it's been a crazy ride. But right from the very beginning, when we first kind of looked at the technology, which, as I mentioned yesterday, originally was developed on high-end kind of supercomputers, but we saw there was an opportunity to bring that Google Earth experience to regular people on PCs because of the broadband internet, because of 3D graphics on.
But what were you envisioning then? Were you envisioning something like what Google Earth then became?
We were. I mean, we were probably insane as a startup to have that kind of vision. But we had Sony as a backer, so they had a corporate VC arm they invested in us. They invested about $4.5 million when we started the company. And we really did have this vision of this global Earth kind of browsing experience on computers, on other kinds of devices like gaming platforms. We dreamed that maybe something like that might be possible someday on mobile devices. This was, of course, well before the iPhone or any of the smartphone.
And what were you saying at a dinner when somebody said, "What are you doing?" "No, I'm sort of digitizing the Earth and making it easily available."
Yeah, well, my wife would kind of roll her eyes and sort of look away when I would describe the strategy, because it really did seem kind of crazy at the time. But we had the benefit of having seen it, existing, admittedly, on computers that no normal human could afford, right? On SDI systems that cost many, many millions of dollars. But whenever anyone, a limited select few people, saw that experience, it's a really kind of gripping thing if you haven't experienced it before. So we kind of had this feeling that, if we can just figure out a way to make it happen, it will ultimately be successful. But it was a very sort of winding road from that initial idea to finally getting it out there with the help of Google to lots and lots of people. We're about to hit a billion users with the product.
1 billion users.
1 billion total unique installs of the software.
What's all this talk about Facebook? Only 700 million. Yeah?
Exactly.
Mats, could you give us some flames in the background, because now we're moving into being acquired by Google. So
so this is what it ultimately turned into. A lot of investment by Google, but a lot of the things you're seeing here, the full 3D model of the Earth, a lot of the data didn't really exist when we started the company. Full 3D models of city with the photorealistic textures. That was another thing that we thought might someday be possible, but it all happened a lot sooner than we expected. And of course, more and more stuff on Google Maps and Google Earth is real time. So as more and more data, it might be something as simple as transit data, or in this case, weather data, or a post-disaster scenario where we're going in and imaging and trying to help with the relief efforts. It's going from kind of a static depiction of the world to something that's much more alive in real time.
Yeah, I would be extremely proud if I created that. But where will this all go?
Well, I think I think a lot of people, anyone who has an iPhone or an Android phone, is kind of seeing, certainly where a lot of our attention these days is, which is, of course, on the mobile experience. I think Google Maps for mobile is a really important part of Android, for us. It's a great kind of flagship application for that platform. We recently introduced zoomable 3D buildings, on Android. So a lot of what used to be there was Google Earth and then there was Google Maps, which was more accessible because it was in the browser, but not quite as sexy and didn't quite have as many features. Those things are converging. They're converging on the desktop and they're converging on the phone. So yeah, we're trying to build the most amazing, useful, mobile experience possible to help people get around and help people find cool stuff.
So you got bought by Google. You joined Google. You were VP for Geo. Yuri here before, he said that I want to make my own decisions. and he also left Google to start his new company. But you once said that you know, the ability of the realm of the possible expanded so much. You were interested in sticking around. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you asked that question because you know, a lot of companies are getting bought today. A lot of companies are getting set up to get bought. And one of the things you might ask yourself is, what do you want to happen if you get acquired? You know, if you do get, you know, bought by one of the companies you imagine might buy you, you get a check. But you know, if you're an entrepreneur, it's really about building the product as much as it is about the financial return. And you know, when we were acquired by Google, I really didn't expect to be there for very long. I didn't know, you know, if I would fit into the culture of the company. But I kind of came in with an attitude of, I just want to make sure that Google gets value out of my company. And you know, if that takes a month, that's great. I'll shake hands, walk away, and do something else. If it takes longer, that's fine too. But I wanted everybody inside of Google to perceive it as a success that they had, you know, taken the risk to go ahead and acquire us. And you know, a lot of acquisitions don't work out, and you see founders come in, and you see founders go after a short period of time. And I think, you know, that's something that we have to be careful of. You don't want to sort of kill the golden goose by selling your company and immediately bolting for the door, because if companies like Google aren't seeing a lot of value from those acquisitions, you know, you might see the sort of rate of those acquisitions, you know, slow down over time. So I think it's really important for entrepreneurs to think about what would happen if I got bought and how can I really make this successful. And you know, in my case, I was really lucky because what Google wanted and what they considered a success ended up being something that was a lot of fun for me, because they really wanted to invest and build out this area. And it just so happened that because of that stage of development of Google, Google was mostly a search and ads company at that time. The major acquisition outside of search and ads was Blogger. And so there wasn't a lot of, it was basically what you might call white space in the company. It was something the founders were really interested in, but there weren't sort of, you know, entrenched, you know, vice presidents and structures and so on that might have made an acquisition, you know, challenging to fit in. It was basically, we came in, there was nothing there, and the founders, you know, essentially said, go, you know, go build something cool.
But I've always been curious how that process looks. So you go up to Larry or Sergey and he said, listen, we need to have 6,000 cars driving on every street in the world, and the good thing, we're going to photo everything, and then we're going to know it.
Well, that
and
was
it's going to
Larry's
cost
idea.
this much. And they say, great, here's the check. Or how does it work?
Yeah, you know, in terms of expanding the realm of the possible, I don't think I'll ever look at things the same way, sort of post-Google as pre-Google. But you know, we had built a company, we had a certain amount of money, you're frugal with it as an entrepreneur. You know, we were building kind of the business case of how to invest in data and how to invest in expanding the product to sort of keep the revenue opportunity in line with costs and so on. And so after we were acquired by Google, I went in to present our strategy to Sergey, who was the person who was kind of really looking after us at this point. And I proposed that we wanted to expand outside of the United States. Huge idea, right? And that we wanted to go to maybe 100 cities around the world. So we had gone through this process of picking the cities that had the, you know, the most population density and internet adoption and so on, that we thought, okay, we'll get payback if we invest in data for these cities. And you know, Sergey kind of looked over, I'd unfurled this kind of big chart of kind of where we wanted to go. And he saw all these other sort of squares on the chart, which represented other places where data existed, but we weren't proposing to get it. And he looked at that and he said, well, you know, Google's a global company, maybe we should just get all of it, you know? And I was pretty shocked. But we went away and then came back with a different proposal to do something much more aggressive. And you know, I thought it was a huge amount of money at the time. It was some millions of dollars, but it wasn't tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And you know, it was such a smart thing for Google to do at the time, because they did invest, they invested ahead of everybody else. It wasn't with a lot of sort of spreadsheets or business plans or sort of analysis. It was really just, I think, kind of intuition and Larry and Sergey's belief that you know, this stuff would be useful, that geospatial data would be a really important part of how people thought about finding things and doing searches in sort of a bigger than text search way. And so they just kind of went with this intuitive thing of, yeah, let's invest. And it was a very, you know, was and is still a very flat company, and that was kind of that was one meeting. Actually, I came in with a contract, and Sergey, I said, okay, are you sure? And he said, yeah, I think so. And he said, just a second, you know, let me ask Eric. And so he sort of popped over to the next office and conferred with Eric for a second. And then that was it. And we were off and running. And then, you know, it seemed like
But it sounds more like a startup than a 25,000 people company.
Well, it was a 3,000 person company at the time, but, you know, still a pretty big, you know, operation, and had just gone public. But, you know, every 6 months, you know, afterwards, it seemed like there was another kind of big thing that popped up, and the answer was always, you know, yeah, you know, this seems to be important, let's go for it. And so things like Street View, things like our expanded satellite coverage, and, you know, we actually have some of our own airplanes today. We have very extensive coverage around the world, and, you know, many different types of data. And it's been fun. Yes, always something new.
What did you learn about innovation from within Google? How does Google innovate?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's evolving. I mean, you've probably heard people from Google talk about, you know, 20% time, big part of the company culture. It still exists. It's still very much a part of the culture where, you know, any engineer, anybody in the company can take a fifth of their time and pursue what they want. That's kind of a let 1,000 flowers bloom strategy, bottoms up. You know, let a lot of people try a lot of different things and look for that one thing that seems to be really special and you know, to have real value. We continue to do that. I think to sort of mixed in with that, Larry in particular is interested in identifying really, really big opportunities and also kind of blending in a top-down model where we're looking at sort of big white space opportunities that the company can go in and with more of a directed approach also innovate. And you see examples of that, some of which seem, you know, pretty crazy on the surface, like self-driving cars. But you know, these are long-term investments, and I think some of them are going to end up looking really, really smart, you know, over the right time horizon.
If you start out with sort of Earth as the scope, there's not so many other places to go. I mean, are you doing Mars as well, and so forth? Or?
We did Mars, yeah, we did.
You did that?
Yeah.
I heard a rumor that when you look at the moon, if you zoom in really, really deep, it becomes a cheddar cheese. Is that true?
Not a cheddar cheese. But in Mars, actually, recently, and this is an example of when you put a very large amount of data online that people haven't really inspected before, people will find things in the data. There are lots of examples in Google Earth of people finding lost cities recently in Saudi Arabia, an archaeological site in South Africa where they found some of the oldest human remains. It was actually a 11-year-old boy with his father who was a paleontologist, but they found the dig site on Google Earth. But anyway, on Mars recently somebody found an inhabited, not really an inhabited base, but what they thought was something that looked like a construction on Mars, but some diligence determined that that was just an anomaly in the sensor that picked up the image.
Bummer.
Unfortunately, yeah, exactly.
What actually is Google Earth? What surrounds us? Is there a lot of satellites everywhere? What is powering Google Earth?
Well, Google Earth, I mean, Google Maps, you know, our geo products, you know, we build this substrate of imagery that comes from satellites and from airplanes, so that's kind of the foundation. Again, some of those now are, some of the airplanes are our own. We partner with companies like GeoEye that actually fly the satellites. We haven't yet launched our own satellite. And then three-dimensional topography. Now we build the three-dimensional textured buildings from multiple images collected from airplanes, and then computer vision turns those into a 3D model. And then, of course, the important stuff is like, what are all the businesses, you know, what are all the places in the world? So the Google Places initiative to really organize and come up with a great canonical data set of every single place on the planet that humans would care about, you know, whether it's a convention center, a restaurant, a hotel, a park, a school. That was a big push for us over the past couple of years. That's at around 50 million places. So, you know, you've got the imagery data, or, you know, the mapping data, of course, the 3D stuff, the place data. So that forms this kind of global geospatial data set that we use in Google Maps, we use in Google Earth, but it also increasingly permeates mobile, it increasingly permeates Google Search, and it's something that we just use in lots of ways throughout the company. So I think...
Well, what do you come up with an idea after this? Because you probably will, or maybe even have. What do you do with it? Sort of, do you go to Larry and Sergey and say, I want to do this now, or do you start your new company, or how do you think as a serial entrepreneur? Yeah,
well, you know, I had this amazing opportunity to come in, and we built out this team that ended up being several hundred people and several thousand contractors and all kinds of crazy equipment for Google Maps and Google Earth. And at the end of 6 years, I wanted to get back and build something again. I had a few ideas percolating.
You wanted to build something new from the start again?
I did, yeah.
Why? Why is that?
I mean,
you're accomplished. You got the check. You nothing to prove. Still, you want to start something new.
Well,
Why?
you're an entrepreneur. I think you know the answer to the question. I mean, the building.
I think every answer is different for somebody. I want to prove to my dad. Others, I want to make more money than my friends, or whatever reasons. Where some people just want to see it happen in real life.
Yeah,
what's your reason?
I think, I would guess it's shared by a lot of other entrepreneurs. It's very satisfying to build something. So, to work with the team to create a product. I think it's similar to people who would write a book or make a film or paint a picture. At the end of the day, after all your labors, you've actually got something to show for it. And that's probably the most fulfilling thing. More than kind of the corporate management stuff. So I had the luxury of saying, yeah, I would like to go back and do that again. And I thought about doing it outside of Google, inside of Google, but Larry's has been very supportive and is really looking for ways to do kind of crazy entrepreneurial things inside of Google. So he made it possible for me to pursue this.
Oh, so you're gonna start. Is it secret, or can you share something?
I mean, it's early, and yeah, it's secret. I mean, we haven't announced anything.
You're among friends here. No
well, I'll just tell everyone here. No, I'm just kidding. But it's in the mobile space, and working with all this data that we've collected and built over the last several years. There are lots of ideas that came up that were kind of off the mainstream path that we didn't have the opportunity to pursue. That weren't really part of the core Google Maps or Google Earth or Google Local Search kind of thing, but I thought would be really interesting ways to leverage this really large investment. And so, that's what my team is looking at, is ways to take this investment that we have in geodata and to do interesting new stuff with it, primarily in the mobile arena.
It's going to be very exciting to see what it is. And with that, we have to wrap up for now. And I thank you very much for coming here and sharing. I'm very, very inspiring. And you should be very proud of what you've created. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.